Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking you all for taking the time and the opportunity to attend our webinar today. First of all, my name is Hussam Habib, and I am the Country Director for Farmer to Farmer Food Safety and Quality Program. Farmer to Farmer is a USAID funded program, and it is implemented by Land O'Lakes Venture 37. Land O'Lakes is a farmer-owned cooperative that serves many of the US farmers at the US, and Land O'Lakes Venture 37 is a non-for-profit organization that leverages the corporate expertise to implement agriculture and food programs around the world. It is founded in 1981, and we are partnering with many donors, such as the USAID, the USDA, and others, to implement development programs all over the world. And we have over 15 years of experience in Egypt, working in agriculture and food sectors. So we are implementing the USAID-funded Farmer to Farmer Food Safety and Quality Program, which is a volunteering program. Our main focus is food safety and quality, and this is very, very important topic in Egypt these days, as we have a lot of changes in food safety and quality. We all know about that, and mainly we are helping Egyptian food handlers to utilize the expertise of US volunteers to improve their food safety and quality practices from farm to fork. So usually our US volunteers are working directly with their Egyptian counterparts, visit farms and work closely and directly. But due to COVID-19, our US volunteers are working remotely. We are trying to start resuming fielding activities. This month, actually, we will receive the first US volunteer to be fielded to Egypt. Things are improving. So we are conducting our webinar today in collaboration with HEA. And responded to the need of HEA members to conduct this webinar on diseases affecting mango production. So we all know that the Egyptian mango turns to be a very important crop, and it is growing all over the country, and there is an increase in the global demand at the past years, which gave the Egyptian mangoes a great opportunity to be exported for higher prices. The Egyptian farmers need to develop skills in cultivation, marketing, and processing to meet the local and global demand. And you know all that due to COVID pandemic, demand and prices are expected to be higher at the coming years. So Egypt at the past years are increasing its exports of mangoes, and we are among the 10 largest exporter countries now. At the mango diseases side, these are very important to be identified, controlled, and cured to make sure that the mango production is the maximum. And we are conducting this webinar today to talk more about the diseases of mango production, or that affecting mango production, by Dr. Romina Gazis. The webinar is targeting the mango and the producers, mango producers and exporters, and we'll cover some of the topics of the disease affecting mango production, plant pathology, basics, and the importance of nutrition and irrigation to plant health and disease management. So get back to our agenda. We'll have a welcoming speech from Mr. Medhat Al-Maligi, the Agriculture Service Manager in HEA, Then we'll have the presentation from Professor Romina. And finally, we'll have the open discussion and questions and answers. I'd like firstly to introduce Engineer Midhat Al-Maligi, the Agricultural Service Manager in HEA. So over to you, Mr. Midhat.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. First of all, I thank a lot Farmer Project, especially Mr. Hussam Habib and Mr. Mahmoud Radi for its great help to the Egyptian industry, especially for us in HEA Association. They are giving us a lot due to, even with the Corona, we're trying to move with this Zoom meetings that's usually too profitable for everybody. Thank you really very much. And I'm looking forward, of course, Sam, for more experts from your side. Sure, I will have the pleasure to attend this meeting, me and a lot of our team and our members. And I present Dr. Romina Gazis, and I welcome her and hope to see you as soon as possible in our country to have more one-to-one talks about your great profession. Thanks a lot, and I don't want to waste time for the people with me. So, and I know that we have a lot to do today. So thanks a lot, and we're waiting for more. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Midhat, and thank you for HEA efforts and to support the Egyptian farmers. Now it is the time to present the U.S. volunteer and plant disease expert, Professor Romina Gazis, the assistant professor and extension specialist in Florida, the director of Plant Diagnostic Clinic at the Institute of Food and Agriculture Sciences, IFAS, University of Florida, Tropical Research and Education Center. Dr. Romina is volunteering with us today to present this webinar that will cover the plant pathology 101, diseases affecting mango production worldwide, and the diseases, the disease management in general. Please try to benefit from her experience and knowledge, share, learn, and discuss. If you have any question or comment, please feel free to post it at the Q&A and or the chat part at the down of the bar. We'll have 15 to 30 minutes at the end of the webinar for discussion and to answer your questions. So now over to you, Dr. Romina.
Thank you. So good morning and good afternoon for you guys all the way over there. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I really am thankful for the invitation, and I really hope our experience here with mango production in South Florida can help you manage some of these problems that you might be having. As it was mentioned before, now the markets are really requesting a lot of organic products and the use of less pesticides. So by understanding which diseases are affecting production and how to manage them, you can really take control of this situation and avoid the use of so many pesticides, right? As you know, a lot of the European markets especially are requesting food safety standards that use less pesticide for production. In any case, today I'm going to be talking about diseases affecting mango production commercially. And my name is Romina Gazis, as he was said. Thank you for the introduction. I am an assistant professor and extension specialist. I'm also the director of the Plant Diagnostic Clinic here at the Tropical Research and Education Center. And I'm basically a plant doctor. right? So I'm going to try to share with you how to understand these diseases, how to detect these diseases, how to diagnose the diseases, so we can manage and build an appropriate program. All right, so this is the outline of the webinars, a little bit different than the one that you have in your agenda. You know, building this program and trying to fit the pieces so you can have a better flow and a better understanding. I will try to be as least technical as I could. So if you have any questions, if you don't understand a concept, just let me know at the end, and I can definitely go back and try to explain myself better. So at the beginning, I'm going to talk a little bit about my position, how my position fits into the local agriculture. The University of Florida is a land grant institution, which means that we work really hand to hand with the growers and the industry. So we are very in the field, very engaged with our industry. I'm going to also talk about the challenges of tropical agriculture and South Florida horticulture. So there will be some aspects that you wouldn't be able to relate because we have very different climates. However, a lot of the challenges are widespread, right? Every grower goes through a lot of these challenges, so I'm sure you're going to relate to some of them. Then I'm going to give a brief, very brief class on plant pathology 101 in case you don't have the background on plant pathology, and it's just gonna help you understand later on when I go through all the major diseases of mango. I'm also gonna go through disease management, and at the end we're gonna have questions and discussion. So this is a long webinar. Hopefully you have some coffee next to you, and you are gonna remain awake throughout the talk. And but we're gonna make a break, kind of 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the moderator instructions. And so you can go use the restroom and get some more coffee so you can stay awake throughout the talk. So as it was mentioned, I'm an assistant professor of plant pathology. I am based at the Research and Education Center in South Florida. I'm a specialist on diseases of tropical fruit trees and tropical ornamental crops. Okay, so that's my that's what I study for. This is what I work every day, trying to solve problems related to plant diseases. I have a 60% extension appointment and 40% research appointment, which means that I dedicate a lot of my time to work in the field, to work with growers. We are located really in the middle of the agricultural land, so growers can just go to my lab and ask me, what can I do with this? Please help me. So it is my responsibility, and it's part of my duties to help growers overcome these challenges. I have multiple ongoing applied research projects in my lab, mainly related to tropical fruits. I have a big program on avocado and avocado diseases, avocado production. Lime is also very important in my region. Dragon fruit. It is a growing industry here, and it has a lot of problems related to diseases. And of course, I also work on mango and other tropical fruits like passion fruit, guava, lychee, longan. We have a very diverse industry here. So just to give you an idea on where I am located, Florida is in the southeast of the United States, but as you see, Florida really is very south, is really in the Caribbean. So my region is very different than any other state in the United States. So I'm very my work is more related really to places like the Caribbean, tropical Asia, tropical Africa. We share a lot of these crops and we share a lot of these problems. So very different than the rest of the country where they grow row crops, so vegetables, wheat, soybean. In Florida, it's really subtropical and tropical crops, especially in the south of Florida. Here is a zoom in on where is the Research and Education Center. It's in a place called Homestead, which is at the tip of South Florida. So it's really surrounded by beautiful, luscious, subtropical, tropical vegetation. And it has this coastal effect as well because it's surrounded by water. Here is another zoom in of where the center is. Here in this red box is where the station is located. We have orchards within the station where we can do our experiments. And Homestead is where most of the tropical fruit trees are grown. A mix of agricultural land and urban landscapes. As you can see in this picture, you can see a lot of houses surrounded by different type of crops. So it's really like a quilt, really a mix of different industries, mixed with urbanization. So that has a lot of challenges by itself, right? Because you have people from different ethnicities growing different crops, but we all have to work together because plant diseases affect all the crops. And in some cases, diseases can jump from one crop to another. Let's say from avocado to mango, from lychee to longan, from tomato to ornamentals. So we all need to be on the same page and work together to solve these problems. Another challenge is that most farmers have small plots, 5 to 10 acres. And many times they have more than one crop. So, you know, they kind of have to know about a little bit about everything. And there's a lot of ornamental nurseries now taking over the landscape. Just in my county, which is kind of like my district, there is more than 1,500 nurseries. So we are big producers of ornamental plants, and we distribute throughout US to Canada and other places in the world. So again, the Tropical Research and Education Center is part of the University of Florida. The University of Florida has multiple research stations throughout the state, and we are the farthest away from the main campus. And we are the only research center in continental US that works and focuses mainly on tropical and subtropical crops and natural resources. So we are very unique in that regard. And again, we are very, we work on similar problems to other centers in other countries, like in Colombia, Central America, tropical Asia. These are the industries which we have more similarities to. The center has 160 acres and has living collections and germplasm collections of avocado, mango, and other fruits. We have a beautiful mango collection that I wish, you know, sometimes you get the chance to see it. And we have a lot of these different varieties. Some of them have been grown here locally and are adapted for the local climate and local soils, especially because our soils are pretty much limestone, so very high pH, very calcareous. So they are locally adapted to our needs. We have 18 faculty members in the research center, including horticulturists, entomologists, pathologists, breeders, water scientists. So again, when you are trying to improve a crop in terms of you know, getting higher production and better quality fruit that has high value, we need to get information and knowledge from different points of view, from different specialties. So that's the beauty of a research center, that you can just go to your neighbor office mate and, you know, happens to be an entomologist. So we work together to try to figure out how to solve problems. This is a photo of some members of my lab. We are a growing lab, and we are always interested in receiving exchange students, exchange postdocs, visiting scientists. I'm very open to bring foreigner scientists to my lab so we can learn from each other. We have PhD students, we have postdocs, and interns, volunteers. If you want to know more about the publications that come out of my lab, please feel free to use these QRs. And if you see a publication that is not available online, you can just email me and I will send you that copy. So again, we need to address problems in a multidisciplinary way. And these are here in this slide. You can see the faculty members located at my station that work in problems of tropical fruits, including mango. So we have Dr. Crane, which I guess you already kind of know about him. He was part of this farmer-to-farmer program maybe a decade ago, and he was able to go and visit in person the groves and the orchards, and he has filled me in a little bit about how you guys grow mango. I'm sure in 10 years that has increased a lot and changed in sophistication of the horticulture practices. And he is a great source of knowledge. He knows a lot about mango varieties, fertilization, irrigation, and all that kind of stuff that I'm sure you're interested. So be, you can contact him. I'm sure he will be able to also provide information. We have Dr. Carrillo, who is an entomologist. We have Dr. Blair. He's an ag economist. As you know, everything boils down to cost, disease management and production, and everything has a dollar sign to it, right? So we are trying to be more efficacious in the way we spend the money so the growers can make the most out of it. So it's always good to have an economist in your team. We have Dr. Schaefer, who is the plant physiologist. So in terms of drought, flooding, tolerance, photosynthesis potential, he is the expert on those topics. Then myself, I'm the pathologist of the group. So I'm always involved in these projects because diseases are widespread and are one of the biggest challenges for growers. We also have an extension agent who is the one that bridges the academics with the growers. So because we are located in the middle of agriculture, I can just cross the street and visit a grower. So that's no problem. But sometimes we need to plan more visits, or maybe a grower that is not that informed about how the university works. So the extension agent is the one that connects the faculty members with the growers and plan these seminars and workshops and field days. So it's very important to have an extension agent also in your team. And as you see some at the bottom of the slide, these are some pictures of my lab and myself interacting with growers, with students, trying to disseminate the knowledge that we gain. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of tropical agriculture. And so when you think about South Florida, you think about the tropics and palms and tropical plants and tropical fruits, big lawns, luscious vegetation. And that's true. We do have a subtropical climate. As I mentioned before, our climate is very different than the rest of the country. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to relate to the rest, even to the state, right? So we work a lot with people in the Caribbean and in tropical Asia, hopefully also in Africa. So we have warm temperatures year round. So we barely, I think maybe once every 15, 20 years, we get a frost event. So we usually have temperatures above freezing and very warm, the average 80s, I would say. We have high precipitation. We are starting rainy season right now in May. And so this environment is really conducive for a great diversity of crops. So we are not light limited and we are not water limited. We are a little bit, quality of water is changing. However, we still have a lot of water, abundant and abundant light. So we can grow a lot of different crops. However, this weather is also very conducive to disease development. Okay, so we have a lot of diseases and a lot of pests. In addition to that, as you might know, Florida is really a gateway for invasive species. We have a lot of international ports, receiving people that come for tourism or for business from around the world. And a lot of these people bring things that they shouldn't be bringing, and sometimes inspections are not thorough, so some of these things escape. We are now between 1.5 to 2 invasive species per month. So we are really worried about invasive species. We have examples like laurel wilt of avocado that is killing the avocado locally, is really damaging the industry. Citrus greening, which I'm sure you have heard about, also an invasive. So we are always concerned about the introduction of these new diseases and pests that can jeopardize the industry. So we do have a lot of disease pressure. These are some examples of diseases of ornamentals. We have a lot of pests. As I mentioned, we receive a lot of invasive pests that can jeopardize production and cost more to the growers, right? All of these diseases are going to have a cost in terms of scouting, in terms of using pesticides, cultural practices. All of that reduces how much the growers can get out of their crop. So we are always trying to minimize the impact of disease and pest pressure. Especially for Florida, because we grow a lot of crops that are not native, right? None of these, the ones in this table, are native to our land. However, we produce and we export it to other regions within the state, within the country. So when I say this, that this is important because these crops are not adapted to local weather and climate conditions, including soil type. So to begin with, they are already in a non-optimal place and they might be stressed. So that makes them more susceptible to diseases, right? So that's another layer of why we need to be on top of it, because we are not growing plants that are locally adapted. A big challenge is the size of the plantings. So we have a lot of growers with small plots. So trying to coordinate management practice at a regional level has been a challenge. On top of that, we have people from different parts of the world, right? I am originally from Peru, big mango producer as well. And I have the advantage to be able to communicate with the Hispanic growers. However, there are growers from all over the world. So that's another challenge that we, with really dedication, we can overcome these challenges. Another thing is that the industries don't talk among themselves. And this is an example of the ornamental industry and the dragon fruit planting industry. They do share a lot of diseases. Why? Because they are both cacti. They are both growing cactus in the ornamental industry and cactus for fruit consumption, right? However, they don't talk among each other. And they are across, across the road. So there's a lot of challenges that we have to address. I'm sure these challenges are widespread in every community. So those are things that we need to think about when we think about management practices at the regional level. Nevertheless, we are a very fruitful community. These are some pictures of the extent and the massive ornamental production that we have in the area. So it's a pretty busy job. The clinic is a very busy clinic, but we are happy to help growers at any, helping them solve their problems in any of the crops that they grow. Again, the University of Florida is a land-grant university with a land-grant mission, which means that we have to make research-based integrated plant health programs available to growers through extension and outreach activities. So when we do an experiment and we test perhaps a fungicide or a cultural practice, it cannot just stay with us. It cannot just stay in a research paper published, right? It has to actually go to the grower. We have to go out there and translate this science-based knowledge into words that they can understand. and that they can use. If I'm not helping the grower, then I'm not doing my job correctly, right? This is kind of like the mentality of the land grant university. We are here to solve problems and to increase the livelihood of the growers, to make it better. And so with that commitment, the University of Florida has set up several plant clinics across the state. And I'm happy to be the director of one of them, the one in the South region, which you can see here at the bottom of the slide. So my clinic is very different than the other clinics because I mainly focus on tropical fruits and tropical crops. We do get some samples from vegetable growers like tomatoes, peppers, squash. However, most of the growers and samples that we get are from tropical fruit growers and ornamental growers. So this is an extension program. We do have a fee. We do charge the grower a minimal fee, and we help them diagnose their issue and we give recommendations. So we are a very important critical part of the agricultural setting, and that's something that I always want to convey to the people that attend my seminar. This is very important. If you guys have the opportunity and if you need help, just let me know, to establish a diagnostic center, clinic, lab that can really advise the growers quickly and accurately. I think it's a great idea. Let me know if you want to discuss more about it. So this is my clinic here at the station. This is how it looks. We receive samples from everything. We focus on commercial growers, so either palm growers, ornamental growers, tropical fruits, vegetables, anything that is plant, we take and we analyze it and we run tests and we give an accurate diagnosis and recommendations to the growers. As director of the plant clinic, I also need to know about everything, about entomology, virology, any aspect of plant decline, including nutrition and irrigation practices. I do have the support of the faculty members at my research station. So it's really a transdisciplinary laboratory that helps solving problems. Just here are some examples of the things that I see daily. Sometimes I have to go to the field and take samples myself because sometimes it's tricky, but it's a very important job. Again, very important because we are at the front line of plant health. These are just examples of regulated quarantinable pests that went through my clinic in the last months. So once we get this, we need to call the authorities and work hand to hand with the grower to be able to eradicate and contain some of these invasive that can really hurt the industry. So again, if I can encourage you to build a program that has this component, please do it. I really encourage you. Let me know if you need help. This is a very important endeavor. We are extending this knowledge to the growers directly. These are some examples of seminars. We go to where the industry is. If they are landscapers, if they are horticultural consultants, if they are big companies, packing houses, any step of the industry, we can go there, do seminars, hands-on talks, lectures. Sometimes growers come to the lab, like you see here in some of the pictures. We explain to them the best we can, how to solve the problem. So it is a very nice program. I'm very excited to be part of it, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, right? Translated this knowledge into applicable solutions. All right, so if you're ready, we're going to get into Plant Pathology 101. This is going to be a very short overview of what it is, plant pathology, and some of the concepts that you're going to need in order for you to understand the other topics upcoming. So plants can suffer from abiotic and biotic problems, okay? Abiotics problems are the ones in which a pathogen is not involved. So there's no living organism involved in plant decline. Okay, it can be injury, that's a physical damage to the plant, or it can be a disorder, which is an imbalance in the plant. Now, the biotic is when a pathogen is involved in plant decline. So there is a living organism that is causing the symptoms and the plant decline. And that can be pest or that can be disease. I'm a plant pathologist, so I'm really a very tiny part of this holistic view of plant production. Okay, so you have to have experts in all these different aspects of it to have an integrated, holistic management of the crop. So just to give you some examples of plant injury, those are stresses caused by physical harm. It can be lightning. I don't know how many storms you have over there. I'm guessing not that many. But here in Florida, especially South Florida, we are the capital of the lightning. So especially now that the rainy season is coming, we do have a lot of damage actually by lightning. Equipment, mowers, string trimmers, that's a very common injury, especially to the base of the trees when growers are trying to get rid of the weed and maybe are using weed whackers or some other kind of equipment to try to trim and mow the weeds in between rows. There's a lot of time that they hurt the base of the tree, creating these injuries, which are openings for pathogens to get in. Also pruning. Pruning has an art, right? You need to learn how to trim trees, mango trees included. So bad trimming can over prune and you can also hurt the vascular system if you don't do it properly. We have animal damage. We are in the tropics, so we have a lot of iguanas and just animals damaging trees. Chemical burn, very common. It can be done through incorrect herbicide application. They use phytotoxicity through pesticide application. Overuse of fertilizer, you can burn the root system and then cause chemical burn. Temperature can also be damaging and create injury, either too hot, too cold. But in any case, in none of these problems, there is a pathogen involved. That's the reason they are called abiotic, because there's no living organism involved. These are some examples of freeze injury. And at the bottom, you can see here frost injury. You can see how this mango tree, a very young one, is completely wilted and all the leaves very uniformly have browned. That's an example of frost injury. Here you can see at the up left, you can see injury by the use of a weed whacker. Very common in young plantings, very common in backyard avocados and mangoes and fruit trees people like to grow in the backyard. These are examples of cold injury. And when the temperature is not freezing temperature, but it is chill temperature for us. When we talk about tropical cultivars or subtropical cultivars, they are very sensitive to temperatures between 39 to 48 Fahrenheit, and the embryo dies. And then, of course, the fruit is going to drop. Other type of injury can be salt damage, and you might be able to relate to this. That could be because of the soil or because of the water. So it depends which kind of water you use. Here in South Florida, we have very hard water with a lot of salts. And in some cases, you know, that problem can be even worse. So it depends on which type of water you use. And sometimes people add some salts to the soil to modulate or change the pH that can also cause salt damage. These photos are from Peru, actually, where we have a very desert-like type of crop system. So now we're going to talk about disorders, also abiotic. Okay, so these are caused by environmental imbalances. One can be water, either too much or too little. Nutrition, usually deficiency of nutrients. pH, too high, too low. And in some cases, air pollution that can kind of block the stomata, which is where how the plant transpires, how it takes CO2 and how it expels oxygen. So if you have a very polluted environment with a lot of dust and a lot of particles in the environment, and those kind of settle on the leaf, that can also be detrimental for plant photosynthesis and transpiration. So as you know, there are 17 essential elements for plant growth. Okay, so here they are named, and they are divided in macronutrients from the water or air, macronutrients from soils, which are naturally occurring or you are adding through fertilization. And there's micronutrients, right? And they're called macro and micro because it depends on how much the plant needs. Now, the plant can live without some of these micronutrients, but it's not going to perform well, right? What you want is you want a vigorous tree with good flush, with good production of inflorescence, and at the end with good production of fruit, right? High quality. So you really need to give a very good nutrition to these trees. Now, there are some ways that you can tell which nutrient is deficient, but be aware that this depends on the plant that you are working on. So, you know, you will have to learn how that nutrition deficiency looks in mango leaves, and especially on the leaves, and will depend on which nutrient we are talking about and on the conditions. So I would use this, and I can provide these presentations as a handout so you can have it at hand, but I wouldn't really I will only use this as a guide, because again, sometimes these nutrition deficiencies look different depending on the crop, but there are some generalizations. When we see the nutrition deficiency in the new growth, it's usually micronutrients. When we see nutrition deficiency in the older leaves, it's usually macronutrients, and that's because of the mobility of the nutrients. So a deficit in nutrition can be caused by incorrect fertilization plan, including pH. So that will really depends on the type of soil that you have, and that can vary. It can even vary within a planting, because we have micro niches within a planting. So I would really encourage you to, you know, keep track on the pH of the soil and on which nutrients are already available in that soil and which ones can become deficient, right? So you can add. So it will have to be tailored to your context. The pH is very important, because when we have high pH, some of these nutrients are, even if we are putting the nutrients through fertilization and we know they are present in the soil, they won't be absorbed because they have to be in certain way. The molecules have to be in a certain way that they are uptake by the plants. So I always encourage you to have a program that takes care of the measurements of the soil pH, water pH, all of those things are important. When you over-irrigate, you are leaching out, and that depends on how well drained is your soil, how much sand has that soil. And so you also have to learn about the water capacity of your soil, so you are not wasting your money, right? I have a lot of clients that, no, my God, I have invested all this money in fertilization, and then I ask how much they water, and they tell me every day. Here in the subtropics, there's no reason to water every day, right? So I'm always asking the client, always asking the grower, are you fertilizing your plants? How many times a year? Which formulation? Second, how much you are irrigating? You have to take into account the size of the droplets that are coming out of the sprinkles to calculate how much volume you are putting in that soil and how much volume that soil can hold. All those things are context dependent, so you have to learn about that. And when you have a compromised root system, either by a pathogen or because you are putting so much water that you are taking up the oxygen that is available in the soil. Roots breathe oxygen, not like the canopy and the foliage that can breathe or take up CO2. The roots need oxygen. Oxygen is stored in these little holes that are between particles in the soil. If you put a lot of water, those particles are going to be filled with water, and you are going to choke and kill the root system. Without root system, plants are not going to absorb anything, right? Especially nutrients from the soil. So you're going to get all these nutrient deficiencies, and you're going to come and say, hey, but I'm wasting all my money in these fertilizers and the plant's still yellow. So it's time to look at the root system. The root system needs to be healthy. This is a disorder called fruit splitting. Again, no pathogen involved, even though it looks like it's a pathogen, right? It looks like a disease because it's necrotic and it's kind of oozing, but it is actually because of irregular irrigation. So very common in places in which we don't need really to irrigate constantly, right? So we cannot tailor and be on top of it. For instance, here, sometimes it rains a lot, so growers turn off their sprinkles, which is good. But then when the dry season comes, they forget to turn it on, or or it's a unusual dry rainy season, and so the plant doesn't know, should I grow, should I not grow? So there is this discordance on growth related to water absorption. So that's a very common problem when we don't have constant irrigation within an appropriate program. There's another disorder called internal breakdown, which you can see in these photos here, how the mesocarp, which is the flesh, the pulp of the fruit, loses integrity and dissolves and becomes kind of like a jelly, right? Sometimes it's called jelly seed. And research have shown that this is because of the insufficient calcium. So calcium is very important for fruit production, not only in mango, but tomato and other kind of fleshy fruits. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's not a disease, it's an abiotic disorder. All right, so we can get now into the biotic. Remember, these kind of problems, this group of problems is when a pathogen is involved in the plant decline. It can be pest or it can be disease. Now, pests are studied by entomologists, which I am not one of them. However, I need to know about them, and I know a little bit about them because pests can transmit pathogens. They're vector pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi. So, many times we work together with the entomologists to understand the pathosystem in a more holistic way. So sometimes growers come and say, no, I see this fluffy white fungus, right? However, it's not a fungus. A lot of cases, there are scales that produce these kind of cottony secretion. And if you just look, very quickly, it might seem that there is a fungal growth colonizing the plant. However, I always encourage you guys also to have hand lenses and a loop and take a close look at the particles that you see on the leaves. Sometimes they are insects, sometimes they don't move. And then you think, no, it's a fungus. No, but sometimes these are immobile insects. And this is very important because if you are trying to address the problem and you spray a fungicide or certain mineral oils, they are not going to act. They are not going to be effective because you have to target the organism that is causing the problem. So sometimes these insects are very, 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 very tiny, right? Like these spider mites. And sometimes are even smaller, like these airy nose mite. Sometimes you need a microscope to see them. Sometimes you see the damage and you don't see the insect anymore because the damage is very early on during fruit development or leaf development. So it's good that you learn how to recognize damage caused by pest and how to recognize the pest. Sometimes you don't need really to go to the species level. As long as you know the group, you can design a management practice. Again, I'm not an entomologist. I do think that if you're trying to improve this crop in your country, you will need an entomologist on board to talk about the pests. Here are some resources if you're interested. These are, for instance, the ones that are causing problems locally. I do not know if you have the same species or related species. So that's up to your entomologist in your area. If you want to learn more about some of these mango pests and perhaps compare to the ones that you have over there, please go to the IFAS website. We have a lot of educational material for growers. This is a sample that we got through the clinic, which I thought it had just impressive symptoms, and it just tells you how much damage a pest can inflict if you let it out of control. Okay, we couldn't identify which Lepidoptera, which is butterfly or moths, was responsible for the damage on the leaves and on the fruit, because the damage was done, you know, before, and when the grower comes with the samples, we couldn't find any insect no more. However, clearly it's a very important pest. All right, so finally we can get into diseases, which is what this webinar is about, and it's where the field that I'm an expert on. So what is a plant disease? Like humans, like animals, plants also get sick. And what means is that something is happening that is disrupting the normal plant function, right? And is caused by a pathogen. So it's the interaction between a pathogen and the host plant. Okay, and it's characterized by identifiable signs and or symptoms. And just to give you an example, you can see here a tomato plant. And for instance, if it gets a leaf disease, a leaf spot, right? You find spotting on the leaves, necrotic, brown, decaying. So this is the reaction of the plant to the pathogen infection, which is compromising part of this green tissue. As you know, green tissue is very important for photosynthesis, which is the process in which plants create nutrients and food to make them live, right? So photosynthesis is a critical mechanism for plants. And so these pathogens interfering, disrupting the normal function of the plant. So this is when we call that something is a disease, because it is interfering with the plant fitness. It's compromising the plant fitness, reducing some of these critical processes. The same with vascular pathogens, right? If this tomato plant gets fusarium wilt or any other pathogen into the vascular system, which compromises the vascular system, is going to stop and disrupt this movement of water bottom up and nutrients and carbohydrates top bottom, right? So it's going to really impede this movement of water and nutrients through the plant, which is what keeps the plant healthy and going and living. So in this case, we call it a vascular disease. So bottom line, diseases are a phenomenon that is a disruption of normal plant function. Now, a pathogen is an organism that is capable of changing the physiological processes of a plant, causing disease, right? We have millions of species of fungi, of bacteria, of viruses, of nematodes. Not all of them are pathogenic, right? And not all plants are susceptible to pathogens. So pathogen, we are calling an organism that is capable of causing a disease. Okay, and plant pathology is the study of this disease. So I'm a plant pathologist, I study plant diseases. You can also call it plant doctor, because at the end we treat patients, which are plants, right? We diagnose a problem and then we provide recommendations on how to get those plants better. Now, plant pathogens come in different sizes, in different flavors, in different shapes and forms. There are 5 main groups of pathogens. We have fungi, we have fungi-like organisms, which are called oomycetes or water molds. We have bacteria, which includes phytoplasms, which are bacteria without cell wall. We have viruses and we have algae. Okay, so there's 5 main groups of pathogens which can affect plant fitness. Okay, so now we're going to go into diseases affecting mango commercial production. Just to give you a little overview of how we grow mango here in South Florida, we only have 1,300 acres of commercial mango production. Okay, so we are not really producing to export. We satisfy the local demand here in the South Florida area, and we might send some fruit to the Northeast or to the West Coast. However, we don't really have a big commercial production of mango. There is a lot of mangoes in backyards. Almost, I would say, everybody in South Florida that has a backyard with a little bit of grass has a mango tree. And even though these are homeowners and, you know, these are not growers, we do have to take care of them. One, because they are citizens, so we, you know, have to help them. And second, because a lot of the diseases go through the urban forest, right? Citrus greening, laurel wilt, 2 very important invasive diseases were first detected in people's backyards. So for instance, if you are worried about an invasive pest or disease affecting your local industry, you should have a program that includes people growing mangoes in their backyards or in the front yards or in the urban forest. Why? Because these are usually where pests manifest first. So our educational programs go all the way into the homeowners and try to educate them. So we have very different scenarios between mango production in South Florida and mango production in Egypt. I'm not that aware of how you guys have technification or how you grow mango over there. I hope one day I can go and visit and be more aware and think, you know, how can I apply what I know to your context? But this is what I found online. So just by these satellite pictures, you can see that there is striking differences in the context, right? Florida is all green, surrounded by water, with a lot of wetlands. You can see all of the rivers and the lakes. There's a lot of wetlands. This here in the Southwest is the Everglades, the biggest wetland, right, in US and perhaps in the world, right? It's a huge national park full of water. So on the other hand, you kind of have an arid, more desert-like context. So to begin with, we have very different scenarios, but I hope we can collaborate, and what I can tell you helps you. So this is very important because 2 of the main drivers of disease incidence and severity are temperature and humidity. Okay, again, very different context in terms of temperature and humidity. Here, it's another way of showing how different we are. At the left, you can see the rainfall and temperature graph for tropical and subtropical climate here in South Florida. Pay attention to the axis that for the measurements of rainfall, we have the top is 210 millimeters. And in your case, you have 15 millimeters. So, you know, just to give you a scale how different our production systems are. Also, temperature, we are a little bit more similar, but of course, when you have high humidity, the way plants get stressed might be also different. There is an abysmal difference in precipitation. In Florida, we harvest the fruit from May to September, which coincides with the rainy season. I mean, it rains all year, but during the summer, which is from May to October, September, it rains a lot, which is really not good for us. It's very challenging to grow fruit when the environment is so conducive to disease. And all the way to harvest time, we're always under rainfall. On the other hand, in your case that you harvest also similar months, you have no rain, right? So in that regard, it's an advantage to have a more arid kind of desert-like context. So I wanted to talk a little bit about symptoms, right? And I think it's very important because that's the way that you communicate to your extension agent, to your farmer advisor, to your academic, to your consultant, right? The way the grower talks to me and tells me, hey, Dr. Romina, I am seeing these symptoms, I'll send you these photos, and the way we communicate and the way we describe what we are seeing is important. It's like a little language, right? So it's good for you to understand these symptoms. We call anthracnose to spots. When we see something with spots, either leaves or fruit, we call anthracnose. These are dark brown to black lesions or spots on the leaves and the fruits. However, anthracnose is not a disease per se. Why? Because multiple agents can cause the same symptoms. Now, some of these agents might be addressed similarly, but some not. So we really cannot only say, oh, this mango field has anthracnose. I need to know what kind, which is the causal agent. Stem branch dieback. We call these when we see a progressive death from the tip of the branch moving inwards to inside the canopy, right? You can see here at the left how the death, how the wilting and the browning of the branches have started at the top. So it's not something that has moved bottom up, but it has moved top down. And this tells a lot. You know, it helped me a lot with my diagnosis. And of course, the best thing is that I go and see the plant. But sometimes that's not possible, right? So again, this is what we call stem branch dieback. And it can be caused by multiple agents. And it's often associated to stress plants or nutrient deficiencies. We also have symptoms called blossom blight. That means when the inflorescence and the individual flowers in these panicles become black and decay and wilts, and sometimes even the inflorescence curves a little bit, right? Again, it can be caused by multiple agents, but the symptom is called blossom blight. So if you see something like this, you will tell your consultant or your whoever you are asking for help, well, I have this blossom blight, and I will immediately know what you're talking about. We have fruit rot, which is very important because what we want to sell is the fruit, right? So obviously we can't sell a fruit that is rotten. So this is when the infection is causing fruit decay or rot of the fruit flesh. So not only is causing these spots on the surface or the peel of the fruit, but it's actually compromising the pulp and it's making the pulp kind of liquidy. And these are usually large lesions that are mushy, soft, water-soaked lesions. You can see here how it, I mean, you cannot touch it, but you can see that if you touch it, it will be very mushy and very soft, decaying flesh. And it's also caused by multiple agents, mainly fungal, but there's multiple agents involved, sometimes mixed infections, sometimes only one. And here you can access this publication at the bottom of the slide. Very nice, showing how different agents are causing different fruit rots and different symptoms. So again, this is just a description of how the plant or the fruit is looking, not necessarily implying that a specific disease. Scab. These are lesions on the fruits or the leaves that are kind of dry and scaly, and it gives this corky or alligator skin or crocodile skin look. You see how it's dry and wrinkled and it has some scar tissue, and that can be caused by different things as well. So again, if a grower tells me, you know, 20% of my production has scab, that's just a symptom. That's just a piece of the puzzle, right? It's a bit of information. However, it's we need more. We need to figure it out who is causing that scab. It can be caused by insects. It can be caused by phytotoxicity of some fungicide. It can be caused by mechanical damage. So sometimes you have fruit that is rubbing against another fruit or against a branch that can also create injury, which then becomes scabby and corky peel development. And certain disorders can also cause scab on fruit. Here, for instance, look at this scab. This is caused by thrips, mechanical damage, and a disorder. So again, you know, this is just how it looks, not necessarily implies who is causing the issue. If it's something abiotic, it's something biotic. If it's a pest, it's a fungus, it's a bacteria, we don't know. This is just a little piece of information. So what do we need to know? Who is causing the problem? Because the management, either cultural or chemical, will depend on the causal agent. Certain chemicals only work on a specific group of pathogens. For instance, fungicides will not work on pests, nor on disorders, right? So before spending all this money and all this time, it's better to have an accurate diagnosis. So then you can design a management program based on who is causing the issue. In addition, certain fungicides work better on certain species of fungi. And it is true that there's not lots of research on susceptibility of or sensitivity of different fungi towards different fungicides in terms of mango production. However, we know that certain fungi are more sensitive to modes of action of different compounds. So if you tell me, you know, I have an alternaria problem, a cholecalciferol problem, I can tell you, okay, this mode of action, this molecule works very good for this group of fungi. So it's better even to know, you know, not only fungi in general, but which group. And therefore, knowing who is causing the symptoms will help tailoring the management recommendations. So very important to know who is causing that disease. All right, so we are 11:10. So what are your thoughts on having a break? Should I continue? The next topic is major diseases of mango. So that's kind of like a long, pretty detailed section.
Let's take a break and get back at 5:20. I mean, our time 10 minutes from now.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Sounds good. Okay, perfect. See you in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
يا حسام بيه.
ايوه يا باشمهندس.
ايوه يا باشا، ده حاجه جامده قوي.
عظيم.
لا محاضره تقيله.
عظيم عظيم. ان شاء الله لما تدخل في المانجو ديزيز يعني الموضوع يزداد عظمه.
هو الميزه كمان ان انا في العربيه، فانت عارف طبعا الطرق في مصر ما بتخلصش، فالست تاخد راحتها يعني. ربنا يستر بس على البطاريه.
اوكي ماشي يا فندم، مفيش مشكله.
ماشي ميرسي يا باشا. يلا نتقابل ان شاء الله.
ان شاء الله. اتفضل يا فندم.
احنا في بريك لمدة 10 دقايق ان شاء الله. تمام. وكذا حد كان بيسأل على الترجمة. تمام. احنا اعلنا ونوهنا قبل كده ان الندوة هتكون باللغة الانجليزية، فاحنا اسفين لو في حد كان محتاج ترجمة. حاجة تانية، احنا هنحمل التسجيل بتاع الندوة ان شاء الله على قناة اليوتيوب، وانا شيرت اللينك قبل كده على الشات. تمام. وممكن حد يبقى يرجع له ان شاء الله. هي كمان دكتور رومينا بتتكلم يعني انجليزي بسيط كده سهل، يعني مخارج الحروف كلها ظاهرة بالنسبة لنا، فان شاء الله هتبقى سهلة يعني.
All right, so it's 11:20 here. Is it fine if I continue? Everybody back?
Yes, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully you got more coffee and you are ready to really dive into these diseases that could affect or are indeed now affecting mango production for you.
Yeah, just wanna say to you that according to the USAID rules, we are not supposed to recommend any specific chemical or active ingredient without the permission. So I mean, I'm sure that you are not going to do that, but just for reminder.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because each country has different restrictions, and there has to be a lot of testing for efficacy. Number one, does it work, right? Number two, what's the residue? Because these fruit are going to be consumed, right? So there's a lot of regulations that are specific for each country. So I can't really give you a recommendation. I can give you recommendations on cultural practices. However, I cannot give you recommendations on fungicide. That's very true.
Yeah, exactly. And for Egypt, we have the official source for approved pesticides and chemicals, which is the Agriculture Pesticide Committee, and their website is available. So any grower can just go to the website and search for the active ingredient, and even they are issuing the annual recommendations for pesticides and chemicals and others. So they can, it's a great source and available for everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's exactly what I do when I do diagnosis and offer recommendations. I constantly go up because things change, permits expire, and new research is always available. So it's always good to be updated on this list and which products can be used. And remember also how they are used, if they are drenched, if they are sprayed, and so on. There is also regulations on the way and the amount per year. So good for you to go there and get more familiar with these compounds and how you can use them. So I'm going to start with this algae leaf spot. I do not know if it's present in Egypt. I did a little bit of research to see reports of diseases on mango in Egypt. There's not lots of information, However, this algae is wide world distributed, but it really likes humid environments. So you might not seen it, or perhaps it's not a big problem. One important thing about this algae is that it has 200 hosts plus. So, you know, maybe there is other crops around your mango planting, and so it's very good to be aware of the environment that your planting is, because this algae can jump from avocado, lychee, longan. It's pretty much in every plant we have here in South Florida. So I wouldn't be surprised that you do have it, but it's not a problem. So sometimes called red rust, and is caused by the plant parasitic green algae Cephalourus virescens. And this is a serious disease when an orchard is not well kept. So when they are poorly managed, and then you have other diseases, foliar diseases, or you have a lot of sucking sap insects, then it can become a problem. Okay, it can affect foliage and very rarely fruit in the case of mango. For instance, in guava is a big issue for the fruit as well. Dragon fruit too. So bottom line, it has a wide host range. So keep an eye on this disease. It can be recognized because it has like a velvety, very kind of like when you touch it, it's fluffy and it's kind of like a little carpet, and it's orange to rust color, usually on the top side of the leaves. And it produces these sporangia, which is where the spores are produced, which is like what gives this feeling of fluffy or velvety. And it requires high humidity to establish and spread. So maybe in nursery situations, when you have a lot of potted plants waiting to be bought, to be planted, or when you have big canopies, and then, you know, in areas where you get a little bit more of rainfall. Now, this is a parasitic algae, so it does kill the leaf tissue. And remember, leaves are very important for photosynthesis. So if you have an extensive colonization of this algae, then that leaf is gonna die, and that's gonna reduce the vigor of the plant and make that tree weak and maybe more susceptible to other diseases. And it can indeed cause leaf defoliation. Okay, so how we manage this? Mainly with cultural practices, and increase aeration. This is a recommendation that I'm going to give you to most of the diseases that I'm going to talk today. Keep the canopy pruned. You know, there is a threshold that how much canopy you need to get certain amount of fruit or certain flushes and inflorescence. So you don't need to keep, you know, a very, very full canopy, because it's better to have airflow going through the canopy, preventing leaf wetness. You know, you don't have rainfall that much, but you do have perhaps overhead irrigation, which works like rain, right? It leaves this free water on the leaves. So this is very conducive to pathogens to germinate and colonize the tissue. So always I recommend to prune and increase aeration. Don't put trees two together, you know, very close together, and really leave space for this air to dry the water droplets. Again, avoid long hours of free water on the leaves, and there are some algicides that contain copper, which are effective. Now, this is an example of how a grower will take a decision, right? In the left, oh, sorry. In the left, you can see some leaf samples very colonized by these algae, right? Some of them are already have fallen and they are completely covered by these algae. So we do recommend, besides cultural practices, to do some spray until the population of the pathogen comes down. Now, if the grower comes or I go and visit and I see what you see in the right, at your right side, just few spots here and there, then, you know, I would just recommend to start watering in the morning, change the overhead irrigation to drip irrigation, and things that are gonna really reduce the humidity in the canopy and therefore limit the growth of this disease or this pathogen. Now, this other disease called Alternaria rot or black spot. This is present in Egypt based on literature research, and it's caused by a fungus named Alternaria alternata, which again, an important point or fact about this pathogen is that it has a lot of different hosts, including tomatoes and landscape plants, and you name it. Alternaria can grow in any plant tissue and is able to colonize it. So again, be aware of what is being grown around your planting. So it affects leaves, panicles, and fruit. The lesions are small and dark brown at the beginning and have these diffuse margins, okay? These lesions expand as the fruit matures. So as you probably know, whenever you harvest the mangoes and they are in the ripening process, they become more susceptible to diseases. And these, you know, you say, oh, but when I picked it up, it only have few spots, few tiny spots. And then you put it in storage and then you see how these lesions really expand. And that's a very typical thing to see in mango production. And it's because the peel becomes more susceptible to fungal and bacterial colonization. So it can become a really important post-harvest disease. So if you have a packing house, that's something to keep an eye on. This fruit gets infected in the field though, right? So some of these infections can be quiescent, which means that the fungus will land on the fruit peel and it will germinate and it will colonize a very small area, right? And then the grower will pick the mango, is transported to the packing house or to the storage facility, and then is when the fungus becomes to grow. Now, this it is possible to get contaminated outside the field, but very, very likely the contamination happens in the field. And so these lesions start in the lenticels first, and then they expand. And at the end, after several days, there will be a rot. So that means that the flesh is compromised. And then you will see this fungal growth that may cover part of the lesion. This disease is only significant in arid environments. So like the ones that you have over there. And for instance, in Israel is the most important fruit disease. So pay attention to that, black lesions with a diffuse margin, which is different than other diseases that I'm going to be talking after. So how do we manage? First of all, there are differences in susceptibility based on genotypes. I am not familiar with the cultivars that you like the most or the ones that you have more acres. But in terms of the ones that we grow here, Kit is more resistant than Hayden and Tommy Atkins. So if you know that this disease is affecting your area, you know, better to look and you don't want to spend time and resources in managing the disease, look for a genotype that is more tolerant, right? So your resources for disease management are going to be lower. Now, it requires regular fungicide applications. If you are growing a susceptible cultivar and you have high disease pressure, you have to start 2 weeks after fruit set. Post-harvest treatments include cultural, brush of the fruit with hot water, or the use of a chemical, right? Again, like I said before, the infection occurs in the field. So that's the reason you want to avoid having this fungus already in the skin of the fruit, so it doesn't develop when you store the fruit. And very important to highlight is that this fungus has a wide host range. Again, it causes leaf spot in a lot of crops, and spores are airborne. That means that wind can move spores from your neighbor, maybe planting tomato, and then it's going to move into your field, depends on the air movement. So those are things to consider. Now, anthracnose, I know it's present in Egypt, but it's likely not as severe as in tropical or subtropical places, because humidity is very important for the development of this disease. This fungus, Coletotricum, and multiple species of this genus of fungi needs at least 6 to 8 hours of free water to germinate. So if you don't have a high volume overhead irrigation and don't receive a lot of rainfall, and there's not a lot of humidity in the air, then you probably don't have much problem with this disease. I'm not really aware of the conditions over there, but this is one of the most important diseases worldwide. Pre-harvest, post-harvest disease is certainly the most important disease on mango in South Florida and in the Caribbean. This fungus can infect all aerial parts, so stems, leaves, panicles, fruit, and again, very important disease in places with high humidity. So I did find this paper that, again, I'm gonna provide this handout so you can, you don't have to, write it down right now. You're gonna have the handout, and then you can go and look and see what is the state of this disease in your country. And it's a very nice paper discussing the symptoms observed in the field. Here you can see how it causes anthracnose. Remember, black spots, anthracnose symptoms on the leaves, especially the younger leaves. The mature leaves are not susceptible, are highly tolerant. And so the younger growth is the one that needs to be protected. It can also cause tip burnt or decay, dieback in younger trees. Here you can see some figures of the spores of the fungus and how these melanized structures, which are called apressoria, are the ones that are infecting the tissue. So in the field, you have these spores landing, they are moved by water splash and air. They land on a susceptible tissue, and then they develop these melanized, highly resistant and recalcitrant structures. And then, they infect the tissue, and perhaps they develop when the fruit is still attached to the tree or after harvest. But it's a quiescent type of infection. So it causes blemishes on the fruit that makes it unmarketable, right? Nobody wants to buy spotted fruit unless you go to the farmer's market or to the local market, and then people are more receptive to imperfect fruit. But again, if you are going to store these mangoes and transport it to another country overseas, it's not good to have these infections because they do develop as the protection of the peel wears down through the ripening process. So no good to have them infected when you are storing the plants. If you are collecting and harvesting spotted fruit and selling it in the farmer's market, it might be okay because the flesh is not really compromised until this fungus extends its infection. Here you can see a photo of the mango festival, which happens during the summer. So it's soon to happen here, June, July, in Homestead. And you can see all these varieties of mango that we grow locally. These are people interested in mango cultivation, a lot of homeowners, a lot of enthusiasts that like to have different type of mangoes. But as a pathologist, what I see is this sea of anthracnose, right? You can see that most of the mango are susceptible to this fungus. So most of them, you can see those black lesions that are very characteristic of anthracnose caused by Coletotricum. And one thing that is characteristic is also these tear stain symptoms. And why? Because when you have overhead irrigation or rainfall, the water is going to drip down the mango shape, right? It's going to drip down and it's going to move the spores with this water, which then is going to distribute and give the opportunity of these for these fungus to colonize along the way of this dripping water. So that's called the tear stain symptom, very characteristic of anthracnose. Now, this same group of pathogens, several species of Coleototricum, can cause blossom blight, which can severely impact the inflorescence and reduce fruit production. So as you can see here, not only the flowers get infected and then start getting dark and decaying and dropping, but also the pedicel of the inflorescence. So it is a very damaging disease, because of course, if it's going to damage the inflorescence, then you have no fruit production. So it's a very important disease for us, and especially because we have to manage it even before fruit set, right? You have to be even before blooming. When it starts blooming, then we have to address it, because we don't want to lose these flowers. Now, the inoculum present in the inflorescence or on the leaves can infect the developing fruit. Here you can see a very, very baby, tiny mango fruit already with these anthracnose lesions, right? So this fruit is not going to develop, it's going to drop, and then you're going to have losses. So the inoculum, which is the source of the fungus, it could be pieces of the fungus, pieces of mycelium, spores, asexual spores, sexual spores. They are as a reservoir, like it can be the leaves or the panicle, they are just there. So if there's water splashing or air or very hard air movement, those spores can jump, right, from the leaves or the inflorescence into the developing fruit. So the severity of the disease will depend on the cultivar. So we do have a range of tolerance in terms of cultivars and the environmental conditions, right? If you have a lot of rain, high humidity, warm temperatures, then the disease can get pretty severe. As you can see here in these photos, really the fruit is highly infected when the conditions are favorable. And it will depend in which Coleototricum species we are talking. Some of them are not as damaging as others. Here there is a bar graph representing the lesion diameter, which we call severity, right? How big are these lesions? How much of the fruit is being compromised by the different Coleototricum species. And one important thing to highlight is the cycle. And actually this is also important in many of the foliar diseases, okay? So because several aerial tissues can be colonized, such as branches, twigs, leaves, inflorescence, all of them represent reservoirs for the inoculum. So when you think about managing diseases and having an integrated management, you have to not only think on how to prevent the infection. You can't only focus on the fruit. I know the fruit is the final product, is what you need to have clean. However, you need to go backwards and think about where this inoculum is coming from. So the ultimate goal is to have a vigorous tree that produces high quality and clean fruit. So in order to get there, you first need to reduce this amount of inoculum in other tissues, so the fruit is not exposed to this inoculum of the pathogen. And this is what this graph is trying to tell you, right? How really this fruit gets infected, right? The spores, once the fungus fructifies and produces spores because of the rain or the overhead irrigation, these spores can jump into the inflorescence, and then it's gonna as I showed you before, infect the fruit very early on when it just passed the fruit set. Now, maybe this doesn't happen, and then you have clean inflorescence, but the leaves are still infected, right? And then it can jump into the fruit when it's already mature. But mature fruit still hanging on the fruit is a little bit more tolerant to the disease. However, the fungus can still colonize in a quiescent way this peel, and it will remain there, and you might see it perfect, clean fruit. But once you take it out from the tree, harvest it, and the fruit starts maturing, then you will see this development of anthracnose. So, you know, just the take-home message is that you have to think about the tree as a whole, right? Not just the fruit. So again, just to reiterate, there's different tolerance across all the cultivars. But if you have high humidity and you have anthracnose issues, you do have to have a management, because most of the cultivars are not resistant. They are tolerant, but not to the point that you can just live with the disease. You have to do something about it. There are several systemic and non-systemic fungicides that are effective. Again, look what is registered in your area, in your country by your authorities. And again, you know, we need to reduce the infection to the inflorescence and to the fruit. So we have clean fruit also post-harvest. And since the foliage and branches can get infected, remember these are important sources of inoculum. Here at the right, you see one of my postdoctoral researchers in my laboratory. We have a research project going on testing the efficacy of different essential oils. Again, organic agriculture is very demanding, and but also the fruit gets more value, right? People pay more for organically produced fruit. So we are investigating if we can use some of these essential oils to prevent infection by anthracnose, and how much, you know, we can reduce, mitigate the effect of this disease. So this is one person from my lab spraying these young mango trees. Now, we're going to talk about this bacterial black spot, a very important disease, and it is present in Egypt. And I'm saying very important because the symptoms are quite dramatic, right? Very damaging to the leaves and to the fruit. It can also cause cankers and lesions to the trunk of the trees. And so this bacteria infects stems, leaves, fruit tissue, but it needs natural openings and wounds in comparison to anthracnose. Anthracnose caused by Coletotricum and Alternaria will have the ability and secrete enzymes to go straight to the cuticle and degrade the cuticle and infect that plant. On the other hand, bacteria need natural openings. So they use stomata, lenticels, or wounds because of rubbing, pruning, and so on. Or sometimes insects that make these sucking holes. So bacteria can also get inside through that. So this disease causes fruit drop up to 70%, yield loss up to 85%, and storage rot. So it's a very, very, very important disease. It is present in Egypt and is caused by Xanthomonas citri pathovar mangiferindicae. It's a very long name. We just call it BBS, bacterial black spot. And it's an emerging disease in the Americas. I'm sorry for this map's a little blurry, but you can tell that in yellow, you can see the countries where BBS is consistently reported. So it's well established in the other side of the world, in tropical Asia, Africa, subtropical, tropical environments. I know it's present in Egypt as well. However, in the Americas, it's really an emerging issue. It's only present in Brazil, in Florida since 2015, Hawaii since 2012. So we are starting to understand this disease, trying to find compounds and management practice that will mitigate the effect of this disease. It's very new for us, but I know you guys, it is already established in other regions. Again, this is some resources that you are welcome to go and look for more information. We do have a extension publication from my lab in collaboration with the horticulturist. So it describes all the symptoms and cultivar susceptibility, which also varies, but they're all susceptible, but some of them are not that severe. And you can go ahead and look for this publication to get more information. So the symptoms on the leaf, again, remember, anthracnose, black spots on leaves, kind of the same thing. So this is just telling you the symptoms overlap. The way we look at symptoms are very overlapping. They can be confusing. So it's better to go to an expert to establish a diagnostic network that can tell you this is a bacteria, this is a fungi, which kind of fungi, because your management is going to depend on who is causing the issue. In this case, the leaf lesions are more angular and usually are distributed along the veins, because remember, bacteria needs natural openings and they move with the vascular system of the leaf. So they are usually located very close to the veins. They have this chlorotic yellow halo around the lesions. And one thing that you can use to differentiate this with regular anthracnose is that the lesions are raised. So if you touch it and pass your hand through the lesions, you will notice that they are a little bit elevated. These lesions may coalesce and form large necrotic dead patches. And some you may see oozing out of these lesions, usually when humidity is high. So and defoliation can occur in severe cases. But what is more damaging, of course, is the symptoms on the fruit, right? Susceptibility, again, just like in anthracnose, it increases when fruit matures, right? And is related to the weakening of the lenticels, which allows the pathogen to expand its colonization. Symptoms begin as small, irregular, water-soaked specks, as you can see in figure 8 through D. They start really small, star shape, but then as the disease progresses, the lesions really enlarge, develop this greasy edge or margin, and it becomes raised and can coalesce and can even develop cracks, right? Really like a hole all the way to the flesh. Sometimes you see this oozing, like you see in the figure 1G. You can see how it's oozing here as well. So it's confusing with anthracnose. Definitely, they have similar symptoms, and for the non-trained eye, it can be confusing. So it's always better to test. If you see that these are black, erupted, raised, oozing lesions, most likely it will be bacterial infection, and it can occur in immature and immature fruits. Severe fruit infection results in fruit drop. That is the reason is very important in terms of losses. There are symptoms also on branches. So it can cause this kind of dark lesions on stems, and they are easy to break because the vascular tissue is compromised and the integrity of the subwood and the stem is being compromised. Now, how to kind of differentiate these two diseases on the leaves? Again, very confusing because anthracnose also varies as it progresses. So at the beginning, they might look the same, but then anthracnose has more of a, a distribution, not necessarily along the veins, but all over the leaf. And then they have more of a flat lesions that are larger and maybe even softer than the ones from the bacterial disease. On the fruit, this at the left, you can see the symptoms of the black bacterial spot or BBS. You have these raised lesions that crack most of the time and then ooze. Instead, you have the anthracnose, which is flat and larger, kind of less restricted lesions. So these bacteria disperses from tissue to tissue by wind-driven rain. So when you have overhead irrigation or you have rain and there's a little bit of wind, these bacteria can travel with these water droplets, right, through the air. It can also be transmitted or vectored by insects, and there is mechanical transmission. So it's very important to clean your pruning tools, right? When you suspect about this disease and you are working on a tree or harvesting a tree or cutting some branches on a tree that you see these lesions, very important to sanitize your equipment. And there is also a period of latency, which means that there could be asymptomatic infection, just like with COVID, right? That we see some people don't really express any of the symptoms related to the viral infection. The same with plants. There are some genotypes and there are some diseases in particular that under certain conditions will remain asymptomatic. So it's very important that you test or you are aware that the badwood and the seedlings or the grafts that you are using are free of infection, right? So that's something that you need to be aware of. Then again, be careful with the badwood because you might be buying an infected piece of scion, of wood. How to manage this? We can install windbreakers that will prevent this air current to be transporting these spores. You can avoid overhead irrigation, change to drip, which actually will avoid a lot of these foliar canopy humidity associated diseases, and copper-based bactericides. Again, check your list of accepted and registered formulations. Now, mango malformation. This is present in Egypt, and you probably have seen it. It's one of the most serious diseases. Symptoms include the abnormal growth of the inflorescence. Because infected inflorescence do not set fruit, this disease can greatly reduce fruit production. Very important disease. Growers have reported losses as high as 80%. And you can see here in the corner photo a normal panicle, right? Straight and with the spaces in between the internal spaces in between the inflorescent branches. And then you can see here, this is a sample submitted to the clinic, how it looks very different, right? Very bunchy, short internode spaces, and the it looks like really like a bunch, like a witch broom almost symptom. And don't mind the white powder, which is powder mildew. I'm gonna talk about it after. So this disease is caused by a fungus, Fusarium mangiferae, but there are other species of Fusarium as well that have been associated to this disease. Primary and secondary axes of inflorescence are shortened, thickened, and highly branched. I mean, you can see it's very different than the normal aspect of panicle. These malformed structures have even more flowers, and these are unusually larger. That's why they look like bunches. It increases the amount and proportion of male flowers, and the hermaphrodite flowers are either sterile or abort if fertilized. That's the reason it reduces fruit production, right? And sometimes you will see that leaves come out of the panicles. I don't have a picture for that, but I'm sure if you have it in your field, you're also going to see some leaves coming out of these of the stem or the main structure of these inflorescence. These are examples of extreme symptoms of this disease, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable how dramatic these symptoms can be. These are all mango malformations. And you can see in the right side, some of them have set fruit, but of course that fruit went nowhere, right? Because it just can't develop. So even though this disease has been around for a while, we still have not such a good understanding of how the disease spreads. Long distance spread is through infected nursery stock. Again, this can be a quiescent, asymptomatic disease, just like the BBS. So when you buy nursery stock, you always have to ask, you know, and look at the mother tree. Where is this budwood coming from? The mother trees should be pristine, should be healthy, vigorous, and not showing any symptoms of disease. Even though the pathogen can sporulate on the infected tissue, aerial dissemination of spores may be uncommon. Wounding is required for natural infection. So again, think about when you prune and when you over prune or damage these tissues. And there's evidence that in some cases that the mango bud mite might be involved in disease development and vectoring. Now, how to manage this? Diseased plants should be destroyed if they are completely colonized. Use disease-free planting material, of course. Scion sticks from infected trees should not be used. As soon as the disease appears, the affected terminals along with a basal 15 to 20 centimeters healthy portion should be removed. So there is evidence that suggests that if you have infected trees and you don't want to get rid of them, then you can prune for 2-3 consecutive years. All these, you know, prune it almost back to the stem, and you can reduce significantly the disease pressure in your growth, in your orchard. Now, powder mildew. Since you are in a arid, more desert-like area, probably you have seen this disease quite often. So it's a widespread disease, an important disease of leaves, panicles, and fruit. It can reduce yields up to 90%. Okay, so it's a very important. Why? Because it attacks the inflorescence. So it's not going to let those fruit develop. There's a lot of variation on susceptibility based on cultivars. And if there is fertilization and fruit set, this fruit is going to drop. And younger tissue is more susceptible than mature tissue. It can be recognized just by looking at it. It's kind of easy to recognize. You see this white powder coating. Sometimes you see it only on the underside, sometimes on the upper side, sometimes in both, and that will depend on the cultivar and susceptibility. As infection progresses, the leaves will become disordered. And you can see here how they are crinkled and dry and wavy. So they are distorted. And they sometimes change to a purplish color, which contrasts with that white powder that you see growing on top. On the panicles, you can see here in the photo how they can colonize extensively the stems and the flowers themselves. So mature leaves are not susceptible, so that's a good thing. When you think about management, target those early stages of flushing and those early stages of flowering. Fruit set on infected panicles will likely shed, so they will fall. Sometimes when the fruit does develop, because maybe disease pressure is not that high, the fruit may show some scab symptoms. And fruit larger than a marble will not get infected, so it's not longer susceptible. Epidemiology, most severe during cool, dry weather. Conidia are wind disseminated. Conidia are spores, and they are wind disseminated, okay? And they are released during the day. Now, conidia can germinate in low humidity as well. So that's why it might be very important for you guys over there that you have low humidity. But the best conditions are between 10 to 31 Celsius and 60 to 90% relative humidity. So even though it's most conducive during high humidity time, it can also germinate at low humidity. So management, there are several fungicides and several products that you can use to manage. Just remember, you have to do it before, like when these are, when the trees, most of the trees are starting to open, when the panicles and the flowers are starting to open, you need to apply the chemical. And so here you can see how, based on the phenology, how susceptible are these mango flowers. Remember, young leaves and very small fruit are susceptible. More mature tissues are not susceptible. Again, I found these resources. I will be sure to give you this so you can go and look at the products and the efficacy of the products and which one will be more convenient for you to use. Now, this is a scab. Remember, I was telling you these alligator corky symptoms, right? But it could be caused by multiple things. In this case, the real scab is caused by this fungus, Elisnoe mangiferae, or sometimes called Denticularia mangiferae. And it can be recognized because they are brown, dark, small lesions, angular, corky. Sometimes they have these short hole symptoms, which means that the center of the lesion have completely dried up, and then fall out of the leaf. So it leaves like somebody has shot a bullet right through it. So that's called short hole symptoms. Now in the fruit, you can see these scabby, dry lesions. It's very important in nurseries because younger tissue is also more susceptible. And it's important in places with high humidity. So I am not sure if you guys have it over there. These are some examples of the damage that can happen on foliage and on fruit. Usually it's a dry lesion, so it doesn't really compromise the interior of the fruit. So if the fruit gets to develop physiologically mature fruit, then you can just open and eat it. It's not going to extend, it's not going to compromise the flesh. However, if this baby fruit and very young fruit gets infected, then it's going to drop, right? This fruit is not going to develop. Now, stem end, this is widely distributed, so I think you also have it there. Again, we call this stem end rot. Why? Because the rotting starts at the top of the fruit, where the fruit connects to the pedicel, right? So that's the stem end. And it starts there, but then it colonizes through the ripening process until it decays completely the whole fruit. Now, these symptoms are caused by different fungi, and there's a list of them over there. It could be mixed infections, it could be just one of them. And again, the severity and the way the symptoms look will vary a little bit based on who is causing the problem. But at the end, you will get a very soft, rotten, of course, you cannot sell this fruit because it's completely damaged. And it's a very important problem in storage. So for packing houses, for transport, you don't want to have this kind of infected fruit. Very importantly, also to mention that the infection happens in the field, and you might have intact fruit but infected, and then the symptoms are going to show up once that peel starts being more susceptible to fungal colonization. Again, there's another resource here that you can look and get more information about this disease. So then we have mango decline. And again, this is kind of a term that involves several symptoms and several causal agents. And so it can sometimes be confusing when people tell you, well, you know, you have mango decline, but it can be all these causes. It's a general term that describes different symptoms, including blight, dieback, canker, gummosis, twig blight, defoliation, vascular discoloration, and stem bleeding. So there's a lot of different symptoms that are called mango decline. But what is mango decline? It's really a fungal disease. However, it's triggered by environmental conditions, right? So if you have a stress tree because of certain nutrient deficiencies, because of flooding, because of drought, because of temperature drop, chill damage, you have these fungi that normally lives as endophytes inside the tree. They are just fungi occupying space, having a population or a biomass really small. But then once the tree starts declining and is being under stress, these fungi become pathogenic and start taking over and causing problems. Very widespread, very destructive. Again, different fungi that live as endophytes can cause it. It has been associated with nutrient deficiency, especially manganese and iron deficiency. So again, very important to take into account irrigation and fertilization into disease management programs. Also, if you have root disease or bad drainage, compromised root system, that plant is going to be stressed, and that's just going to give the opportunity of these fungi to change into this parasitic nutrient habit, and then it's going to become a problem. So again, there are latent infections. Infection is facilitated by wounding. You can be pruning and passing these endophytes that might someday become pathogens from one tree to another. Damage is greatest in trees that have been weakened by other factors, as I mentioned before. Bark and ambrosia beetles can transport these pathogens from tree to tree. So management recommendations include increasing the vigor of the trees with good fertilization and irrigation practices. Sometimes when a grower has, but very severe symptoms and they want to save their trees, maybe we can recommend some systemic fungicides just to lower that infection until the plant and the tree recovers that vigor. And some people treat the wounds made by when you prune. Now we have root diseases. This is Phytophthora, very common, widespread. I'm sure you have it. However, it might not be a problem if you don't have, depends on how well drained your soil is. So if you don't have a lot, if you don't put a lot of water and the soil drains well, then you are giving the chance of this root tissue to recover and escape the disease. But this is a big problem in South Florida, very common in nurseries because we have containers that it is very difficult to have a very good amount of water. Sometimes we put too much water and then, the water has nowhere to go. So it remains like a puddle, taking up the oxygen and being conducive to the reproduction of these pathogens. Now, I talk a lot about a lot of diseases. These are not all of them. There's a bunch of other diseases that I'm not going to be talking today. Maybe this can be some other seminar. I really encourage you to look at these two books, Diseases of Fruit Crops in Australia, even though it's for Australia mango growers. There are very nice, very good information about diseases in general of mango. So you can use that as a guide. And my predecessor, Randy Plott's book on diseases of tropical fruits also has a worldwide overview. And these are the list of diseases that I did not talk today, but you should be aware of. So very quickly, disease management. Again, it was said before, we need to look at the pathosystem, which means the whole picture. We need to have an integrative management approaches for pests and diseases, right? And one of the things that pathologists like myself use to understand what's going on in the environment is what we call the disease triangle, which is a triangle with three corners. So it just tells you and explains how diseases occur. For a disease to happen, you have to have a pathogen that is virulent, that is able to cause disease. You have to have a host that is susceptible to that disease, and you have to have a conducive environment. When these three factors overlap, you get disease. If you are outside this overlapping area, you don't get disease. So if you really have this in mind, of these three angles, you can really target those to pull away those angles and prevent disease from happening. Sometimes we are able to address one of them. For instance, let's talk about powder mildew. And we saw that some cultivars are more susceptible than others. Some of them are highly tolerant. So grow those ones. If you know that that pathogen exists where you live and where you grow your crop, grow the cultivar that is not susceptible. Now, this might not be an option, right? Because you have to rely on what's on demand. Maybe the market is asking you for kit, and kit is highly susceptible, let's say. So then you have to look at pathogen exclusion, you have to look at cultural practices, but you always target one, two, or the three of them in tandem, right? To be able to kind of pull away these angles and then prevent the overlapping, which is when disease happens. Pesticides are often needed in commercial production, that's understandable. However, it should not be the first line of defense, right? This pyramid really explains how important prevention is. It's better not to have it than to treat it, right? They tell us, the doctor tell us, humans all the time, it's better to prevent the disease from happening than having to invest resources in fixing the problem. Cultural sanitation practices sometimes are labor intensive, but you know, in this way we can reduce pesticide input, we can increase the value of our product being organic. We have physical, mechanical ways of removing the pathogen and the infected material from the orchard. We have biologicals. Always rely on your natural enemies. Protect your natural enemies, because those are going to protect your crops. And at the end, if you have no other choice, which is in a lot of cases true, use of chemicals. Pathogen exclusion is very difficult. We have a globalization phenomena that pests are increasing their ranges. They're everywhere, moving around just like people. Pests and pathogens are going to get there at some point. So we have to be vigilant. If a known pathogen has not arrived to your production area, scout. Grower education, preventative measurements to prevent the establishment of that pathogen. Sanitation, very important to take that pathogen out of your orchard. Very important to also follow cultural practices that will reduce the spread, germination, or multiplication of the pathogen. And of course, number one recommendation, start with clean material. Very important for diseases that are caused by pathogens that have a latent period of asymptomatic. Consider what's grown around. I don't know, again, what's your context? I'm not familiar with, but in South Florida, we grow everything on top of everything. So here you have a mango planting, and then you have a lot of avocado around. A lot of the pathogens move from crop to crop. So you also need to talk to your neighbors, work with them together to eliminate, eradicate, contain that disease from your area. Use of tolerant resistant genotypes, you will have to take into account the market and you know what is more productive to you and more valuable to you, but basically follow advice of the experts that have tested these different cultivars against these, for instance, 3 major diseases of mango. So that is also important to consider. Cultural practices, again, one of the things that I always recommend, increase airflow by pruning the canopy and not planting trees too close. Follow good best practices for irrigation and fertilization programs that will keep these trees with vigor. Prune diseased plant tissue and take it out of your operation. Don't leave it on the floor. Don't leave it next to the tree. No, take it out of the field. So those spores and that inoculum is not gonna stay there. Avoid injuries to trees and wounding. Sanitize your pruning supplies constantly and avoid excessive irrigation, especially overhead irrigation. Use of pesticides sometimes is needed. Again, each country has its regulations. Just remember that you always have to use it as a rotation, because if not, if you keep using the same active ingredient, you're going to make that pathogen be less sensitive to the compound, and then you're going to have a problem, right? So we need to rotate mode of actions. So get advice from your extension agent, from your consultant, from your university to have a program that is integrated. For instance, this is the IPM program for mango production in South Florida. I talked to the horticulturists, the entomologists, the ag economists, the pathologists. We're all together come and coordinate what we can give to the grower as a guideline, right? When to fertilize, when to irrigate, how often to irrigate, how much to irrigate, when to control for powder mildew, when to control for anthracnose, when to control for scales, when to prune. So you kind of, induce that new flush, and then you get good flower production. And with that, thank you. Thank you all for listening. Hope you learn lots of stuff during this workshop, and I hope to work with you in person one day. And just let me know if you need more information. You can always shoot me an email. I'm going to send this presentation as a PDF format to the organizers so they can distribute it across the attendance. And with that, I'll take any questions if you have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Romina, for this important info and knowledge about the best practices for disease affecting mango production. Okay, let's move to the questions and open discussion. For anyone who would like to talk, please just raise your hand and we'll allow you to talk. Of course, in English. I see 4 questions at the Q&A. Can you see them?
Let's see. Okay, so the first question is, what is the difference between systemic and systemic in terms? So I think it's between the systemic and non-systemic fungicide.
It's systemic and systematic, I mean.
Okay, it's different. Systemic is that it goes within, like when we talk about systemic fungicides or systemic insecticides are usually applied through drenching. So we apply it to the root system, and then the vascular system of the plant will uptake it and distribute it throughout the plant. So when you're talking about vascular diseases or insecticides for sap-sucking insects, it's good to have them everywhere in the vascular system of the plant, right? So that's a systemic. When you do a foliar, usually they stay in the leaf. Sometimes they translocate to other parts like the twigs, but they don't go too far. So you have to think about, first, what is allowed to use. Second, what is effective, or what is effective and then what's allowed, they go together. And then think about the biology of the fungus. Right? If it's vascular, then you better use something systemic, right? Because you need to control it from the inside. If it's something foliar, like the algae, like the anthracnose, then you want to have something that is going to cover and protect the leaves. And something that I did not mention is that most of the fungicides are effective when used prophylactically. So you have to use it before you see the symptoms. Those symptoms are not going to go away. Once you have the leaf spot, you have the leaf spot, it's not going to go away. But you have to cover and have good coverage of those leaf and susceptible tissue to prevent the germination and infection of the fungus. So then there's one, do alternaria species infect canopy, have the ability to infect roots, causing root rots once germs fell to the ground, but rain drops or spraying droplets, or any other way? Okay, so, and if Alternaria is only in mango or also in other crops. So number one, Alternaria, especially alternata, the one causing those symptoms on the fruit that I show, attacks a lot of crops. So that's what I'm always saying. Be aware of what's next to your orchard, because things can jump around. So you need to talk to your neighbor. And Alternaria is a pathogen of above ground tissue. So, foliage, sometimes twigs, inflorescence, and fruits. That's mainly. The roots, no, Alternaria does not affect roots. There's another one that says we had a dark interior of the fruit but looks fine from the outside. This happened 1 year, I think, water excess irrigating, causing the seed to crack open on the lower part due to water residing at the bottom of the fruit due to gravity. So it could be, right? The way you are describing seems like is that kind of internal damage of the fruit. It could be calcium nutrient deficiency. It could be irregular irrigation. Again, this is what we need to test. So if you bring this fruit to the clinic, you know, what I would do is I will plate that tissue to be sure that there is not a living organism causing that necrosis from the inside, because there are some fungi, I don't know in mango, but there are some fungi that are vector or transmitted through the seed. So they might come out from the seed out. Usually we have from the peel in, right? So I will have to test to confirm, but it sounds like it's something abiotic. There is another one. Okay, effects of low temperature during fruit set. Reduce the effects of low temperature. So I don't know, because that will be a question for the horticulturist. But when in South Florida, when we get low temperatures that can damage the inflorescence or the fruit set, what we do is we turn on the overhead irrigation if it's going to go lower than freezing temperature. So you build this ice protecting, actually. It seems like counterproductive, right? But it does protect the tissue from going even below freezing temperatures. So water is used to help with low temperatures. But again, that's a question for the horticulturist, and we need more data on dew point and all those things. Is the BBS exactly the same case of bacterial canker? Correct. Sometimes it's called bacterial canker when it affects the trunk. We call it canker. BBS is also black, bacterial black spot is the same as bacterial canker. That's better to use the scientific name, right? Xanthomonas axanopodis. Sometimes common names are confusing because people use them differently. What are the essential oils used in powdery mildew and anthracnose and flower blight? So again, this will depend on the legal list that you guys have over there. But in my laboratory, we are working with USDA in the organic program to test thyme oil, tea tree oil, oregano oil, and we finished the in vitro testing for anthracnose and scab, and now we're doing the field trials. Powdery mildew cannot be tested in the lab because it's an obligate parasite, so you cannot grow them in petri dishes. You will have to have pieces of leaf to do the testing. But thyme oil seems promising, but again, that will depend on what you're allowed to use. What is the common diseases between mango and avocado? Very good question, because I love avocado. Avocado is kind of my bread of my lab. Most of my research is funded by avocado research. And anthracnose affects avocado. Species affecting mango, the same species affecting avocado. Scab also can cross. Powdery mildew, I don't think so, because they are pretty specific to the host. Phytophthora crosses, Alternaria crosses, So there's a lot of things that are shared among between these two crops. Brief about varieties of mango here that I don't know. The only things that I found were those papers that I will share with you, so you can go and look at them. I know you have kit, and I don't know which is your favorite ones. We grow here the green ones for the Asian market, more than the Tom Atkins, more than the red huge ones. We grow the green small long ones, the Indian types, because we have a lot of immigrants from Asia and they like to have these green mangoes. Let's see, when we can do pest management. So definitely pest management, pest and pathogen management should be done year round. Even when there's no flowering, even when there's no fruit, you need to think about how to prepare for the flowering and the fruit season, right? You need to be pruning, you need to be taking out disease material out of the operation. Why? Because as I mentioned, a lot of this fungi remains in this disease material, just waiting there for the opportunity to colonize more tissue. So if you start clean, you're going to end up clean. If you start with clean material, if you have a sanitized, very well managed orchard, you're going to have highly valuable, clean fruit, right? So I think those are the questions, yeah, in the chat.
So there are more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody asked about the neem oil.
Yeah, so neem oil, again, since it's kind of organic, usually it's allowed to be used. Just it's effective when, so biologicals and horticultural oils are effective when the disease pressure is low. When you have a lot of infection, you need to spray chemicals, synthetic chemicals, bring the pressure down with cultural practices, and then you can start a more environmentally friendly, sustainable management, right? So first, you need to bring this disease pressure down. Once you do, neem oil is a good option for some pests, and anthracnose is not very effective, to be honest. So you have to do it, you have to use it in combination with very good cultural practices. Maybe you guys, since you don't have so much humidity, neem oil is a good idea. Just be careful with the young tissue, be careful to follow the label rates, because you know, you can burn that young, very, you know, soft tissue, and be sure not to use it under high heat, middle of the day sun. It's going to burn. Okay, so then we have how we get rid of embryo rot and fruit drop. So that can be caused by a lot of things, right? We talk about fruit drop because of powdery mildew, anthracnose, a lot of mango decline, mango malformation. Well, that would not even allow for fruit set most of the time. But you have to look, fruit drop is just what happens. It's that result of what the disease is doing to the tree, right? The tree is saying, I'm not going to invest more resources on this fruit because it's bad, so it's going to drop it. So you have to really think about what is going on in order to get rid of it, I guess.
Okay. So, okay. More, does bacteria black spot affect the set of mango?
The set, the fruit set, if it affects the inflorescence. But what we usually see is the symptoms already on the fruit, and it can affect the fruit very early on. So perhaps the fruit set is not being that affected, but then the fruit development is going to be affected. So where can I get more information about avocado diseases? So you can go to the FSQ website. We have actually a whole website dedicated to avocado diseases. I am the pathologist for avocado as well. So I will be happy to talk about avocado diseases when you want. Do you guys grow a lot of avocado?
I don't think so, but we just started this. I mean, let's say at the past 10 years or something. Yeah. It's one of the potential fruits in Egypt now, and yeah, it's part of the list of the technical needs assessment that is requested by HEA. So I see that okay, there is a potentiality here.
Yeah.
To conduct another webinar, or even to be fielded to cover. I mean, if you have opportunity or an availability, we can field you to Egypt to cover the mangoes and avocado diseases. So
yeah, avocado is a big industry, always growing, always on demand. Again, I'm from Peru, so we also grow a lot of avocado. We are, I think, number 2 or 3 in the world avocado producers. You guys probably have a very good climate for avocado production, kind of Mediterranean type of climate. Avocado loves that. So if you have good irrigation capabilities, avocado will be a good business. Then there is if mycorrhizae treatment of mango tolerance for disease. So actually that's a field that hasn't been really studied a lot. Mango probably has arbuscular mycorrhizae instead of ectomycorrhizae, since most of subtropical and tropical plants have those associations, and definitely it will help the plant absorb nutrients, right? That's what mycorrhizae do. Mycorrhizae is supposed to be a mutualist, helping the plant take up phosphorus and nitrogen. But again, if you have a good fertilization program, mycorrhizae, it's just whatever is in the soil. I wouldn't use it as an amendment unless you have some really deficiencies of these nutrients in your soil. But that's a good question. That's something that should be explored further. Okay, so somebody says we have about 400. Is that hectares or?
It's Faddan. Faddan is almost an acre.
Okay, 400 acres. It's growing then. It's not that bad. Do you guys grow Hass? Is the one that probably you guys gonna go for Hass? Yeah, that's good. It's a good. Must we burn the malformation gathered from the mango trees out of the field? Correct. You want to really prune that malformation down, not just the inflorescence. Cut the whole twig, the whole branch. I'm telling you, this will be better. Once you lower this disease pressure, 2-3 years, you can get rid of the disease. But you have to take it out of the field, burn it, don't compost it, because fusarium can remain as a saprotroph and it will be recalcitrant. It produces these structures that they can remain, viable for many years. So you want to really get rid of that material and out of the field, definitely. Yeah, I think that's it, right?
Phytophthora fungus. There is a question. This is at the chat, not the Q&A.
Okay.
Some people posted their questions on the chat.
Okay, so the best treatment for Phytophthora. If you have Phytophthora, if you are in a container place, so if you are a nursery that is producing grafted material for growers, it's very difficult to manage water quantities. I have problems with my nurseries for my experiments, so I understand. It's very difficult to have good drainage. So I would recommend to use good, well-drained soil, first of all, substrate, put some sand so it will drain. If you are allowed to use some of these like Ridomil or, I can't say, but you have to look at the list. There are some fungicides that you can drench, but Phytophthora is very much associated to overwatering. So if you don't have flooding, and you don't put too much water into the soil and it's well drained, usually the mangoes and avocados and hardwoods can really overcome the infection. But there are several fungicides that can be used to at least bring down that disease pressure of Phytophthora.
There's a question about the effective active material to resist the verticillium.
Yes, so verticillium, I think is one of the diseases that I did not talk about and is widespread in olives, in avocado, in multiple hardwood crops. It's a vascular pathogen, so it will have to be something systemic. And I am not aware actually of exactly which compounds to use for verticillium, but I know it's a hard problem for a lot of crops. So prevention also very important. These kind of vascular pathogens move from root to root when trees are grafted. So if you have old planting with big tall trees, very likely that the roots are grafted underneath the ground and verticillium can go from one tree to another. So when you're doing sanitation, when you're taking out a tree that has verticillium, it's better to take also the ones that are adjacent. So you really stop the spread of this pathogen root to root.
Okay, there is a question about the bacteria black spot effect on the fruit set. I mean, you already answered that, but it seems they didn't understand.
Yeah. So fruit set, we mean that the flower has been fertilized and the ovary is producing a fruit, right? That's called fruit set, right? And there's conditions that are needed for this fruit set to be successful. Now, if the inflorescence is affected by BBS, by bacterial black spot, well, there is not going to be any more flowers, right? Because it's going to decay, it's going to degrade that tissue. Now, if the baby mango gets infected with bacterial black spot, most likely it's going to drop. And so this mango fruit is actually susceptible throughout its development. So at any point, it can get infected with this bacteria. That's why it is such a hard problem to figure it out, because it's not like the powder mildew that it's only susceptible when the fruits are small or the inflorescence. These bacteria can infect the fruit from fruit set all the way to mature, physiologically fruit ready to be harvested. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me, hopefully, for the yeah. Okay, so we have what part of the tree should we get rid of through in the malformation?
Yeah, so there's two types of malformation. There is the inflorescent malformation, which is the one that I show you, a lot of these really ugly symptoms of the inflorescence. But there is also what is called vegetative malformation. That is when the leaves and the branches that are having these pedicels and the leaves also get malformed. So when you see the symptoms, you should cut to the base of that branch. I will cut it out, because even though it's not systemic pathogen, so that pathogen is not, because you can see it in certain branches, not in all of them. So that's the advantage, that you can cut it back and then get rid of that source of pathogens. But I will go a little bit lower, right? So if you have an inflorescence that is showing the malformation, just cut that branch that is given to that inflorescence. So best treatment for stem end rot. As I mentioned before, these symptoms are caused by several fungi and the infection happens in the field. So if you want to get rid of it, you need to scout and see, okay, so this row, this plot is giving me this kind of fruit. So I need to address the problem in the field. And you need to talk to your advisor and see which kind of compounds you can use to reduce this infection in the field. And I am not sure right now if the fruit can be treated like they do with Alternaria, that they kind of wash the fruit. And there's some fungicides that you can use post-harvest. So that could also be one option, but you have to talk to your advisor. For black spot, unfortunately, this bacteria is pretty bad. We only use copper and copper derivates to treat bacterial plant diseases. And it seems like this Xanthomonas is kind of non-sensitive to a lot of these copper treatments. So you don't want it in your field. You definitely don't want it. So prevention, I would say, is the most important. Sanitation, if you see it, out of your field, prune it. You know, better to lose a little bit of production, but not to have it established. And then it's a problem that you can't control because there's not many products that you can use. So frost damage or cold injury, again, if you go to the IFAS website of TREC, there is a whole link to frost protection. And again, we live in the subtropics, but once in a while, temperature goes down to the low 40s into the 30th. And when there is prolonged cold for several nights, you can get chill damage and cold damage. And so what the horticulturist recommends is to turn on the overhead irrigation, high volume irrigation, but then it has to be really time with the dew point and when the temperature goes down. So it's not as easy as just go and turn it on, right? There's consideration that have to be taken to do that. And nematodes, I did not find any nematode disease, although probably root knot nematodes are common because it affects really a wide host range. But the good thing is that I didn't find anything that could be like really is a major problem in terms of nematodes. There is no virus reported to cause problems in mango production, which is good. Avocado has the blotch virus, which is pretty bad. There's no phytoplasms and not virus. So you guys have it a little bit easier than avocado growers, actually. So the most dangerous disease in mango is actually one that I didn't talk today. The most economically important is anthracnose, right? Because of pre-harvest, post-harvest, but that will depend on the country that we are at. For you guys, it's probably powder mildew, and malformation. But I think that the most dangerous disease is called sudden decline. And it is a fungal disease that is vectored by an ambrosia beetle, which is a very tiny beetle that is going to make a gallery on the tree and cultivate that fungus for its babies. So it's a grower too, but it's a grower of fungus that is a pathogen to the trees. But it is very restricted in its distribution, and that's a good thing. I think it's in Brazil and maybe in another 2 places. But it's something to keep an eye on. That's what I put that list so you can go and look for more information. And it's called sudden decline, and it really kills the tree. It's like laurel wilt. It's a vascular disease. It wilts the tree and it goes from tree to tree through root grafts. And on top of that, the fungus survives in the soil for years, but it needs the beetle. So if you have the vector, but you don't have the fungus, it's okay. If you have the fungus, but you don't have the vector, it's okay. But if you have both, then that's trouble. Okay, I think that's it.
Yeah, I see that Mr. Ibrahim al-Musallami is raising his hand.
Oh, okay, sure.
If the question or his question wants to add anything, you can talk now, Mr. Ibrahim. You are muted. Okay, so it seems that Mr. Ibrahim doesn't want to talk. Okay,
his name is Ibrahim Muslimani.
Muslimani, okay, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Ibrahim?
Connecting to audio. Mr. Ibrahim?
ممكن نشوف يوسف أبو بكر أو محمد صبيح لغاية ما مستر إبراهيم يرد علينا.
Mr. Yusuf, you are muted as well. You can unmute and talk. Okay, Mr. Muhammad Subeh, you can talk.
Yeah, you can just unmute and talk.
Yeah. Okay, seems you have a problem with the management of the application. Okay. We don't want to waste the, okay. I mean, we are all fine here. So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Romina, for your dedication and your volunteering with Farmer to Farmer. And here, would be happy to host you in Egypt at the future. I mean, to work directly with our mango and avocado growers. So thank you, Heya. Thank you, Heya team.
Pardon me, please.
Okay, Mr. Muhammad, please go ahead.
I just managed to get through. I was asking about ladybirds. I heard they're good for organic, you know, like treating some of the insects, getting rid of them. And when is a good time for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely ladybird, those little Coleoptera, little beetles are known to be good natural enemies for lots of different pests, right? The larvae love to eat aphids. And, but again, that's a question for the entomologist. And we need to know what's the pest that is causing problems, because also natural enemies can be specific, right? Some beetle larvae are specific to some thrips, whitefly, and things like that. So you need to know what is a problem, number one. What are the available natural enemies already there? And then if you need to add natural enemies, again, it needs a time of, first of all, they need to be stored properly so they remain viable, and they need to be released at a certain time. And those are things for questions for the entomologist.
Thank you.
All right, so if there are no more questions, I also want to say thank you. This is my first interaction with the Farmer to Farmer, and I am really farmer supported. My work is dedicated to help people make the best out of their crop and to keep a sustainable agriculture, and that is environmentally friendly, but also friendly to the growers' pockets, right? So I'm really happy to share what we know, even though we do have a very different crop systems, right? To begin with, humidity and temperature, you know, very different. So even though we are very different, I hope that this seminar was useful to you guys. And my team, we have multiple people working on avocado and mango, are ready to help you. And I would love to go and visit with maybe one of the people in my lab. And if you are interested in setting up a diagnostic network. It doesn't have to be a lab. It just have to be somebody that is trained to identify some of these common diseases and give advice to the grower. That I would really like to see that, because that's what, you know, I work on, trying to give accurate diagnosis so I can give good recommendations to the growers. And that's it. So thank you for having me. Thank you for staying for long. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm gonna give this handout to the organizers so they can distribute it to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Romina. A great idea to have this network of for diagnosis, and we can talk further about that and how to apply it with you and HEA. And thank you for HEA team for their efforts and the coordination for this webinar, and of course for our donor, the USAID, we'll share the presentation with the audience, and as well the webinar recording. All our webinars recordings are available and will be available at our YouTube channel. We'll share the links with this, the link for this webinar once we finalize the uploading the recording and montage and others. So thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Romina, and see you in further webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Have a great day and week.